Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a very hot Shouting into the Void special.
Yay!
It's like close to 30 degrees here in England now, and me and Liam have both decided to sit in front of a computer monitor in very small rooms with very little ventilation. So we might get progressively sweatier throughout this episode. If we're just drenched when we finish, then that'll be a good indication of how hot it is.
Yeah.
But yes, this is a special episode of Shouting into the Void because we finished series 2. Last week we watched Doomsday, which was the final episode, and we're doing this now before we go on to The Runaway Bride, the Christmas special, because technically that's the start of series 3. I think they always do the Christmas special on the box sets, the Christmas special first, then the series.
Yeah.
So this is Runaway Bride is effectively 3.x. So before we get to that, we figured, wow, we better speak about the series as a whole as we did with series 1, because I think we both have some thoughts. So this series obviously saw us be introduced to David Tennant as the 10th Doctor, following the regeneration of Christopher Eccleston. Rose stuck along with us as the companion who left at the end of this series. David continued. We had a number of different guest casts, loads of good actors for the supporting casts. You know, Jackie, Pete, Yvonne in Doomsday and Army of Ghosts, Queen Victoria, Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane. So there's a number of highlights in this, but then there was also a number of low points with episodes such as Love and Monsters, Fear Her, The Idiot's Lantern to some extent. So it's a real mixed bag this year, this series. So what are your overall thoughts on series 2?
I was entertained for the most part. I was offended a couple of times. I was really offended a couple more times. But overall, it's there. It's fine. It's the thing when you get older, you just hate everything that you loved as a kid. Because that's just life, but that's fine. 10-year-old Liam would have enjoyed it, all of these every week, having the time of his life. Then he learned to think critically. And here we are now. It's okay. It's fine. I think for the most part, the cast that we got were always good, did the best that they could, with some not so good scripts at times. Some somewhat effective stories in there, some certainly not so effective and you remember for all the wrong reasons. But it still had some emotional beats. I think overall tonally it was a bit messy, a bit all over the place at times. It certainly didn't have as many highs, I think, as series 1 did. I don't think it quite captures the magic that series 1 managed to achieve, which again, sequels, you know how it is. This isn't the Shrek 2 to series 1 Shrek 1 for sure. So that's not ideal, but overall it's goodish. And that's better than it being very, very bad. But I definitely preferred series 1, and I think this is overall probably, still looking back at it, and this just confirmed it rewatching it, my least favorite New Who season, I think, probably.
Yeah, I think I probably have to agree. And thinking about all the seasons that we've got coming up, even just within the first 4, I'm like, yeah, this is definitely bottom of the list. But at the time of release, around that time when we were younger and watching it, I used to love this series. I'd rewatch all the episodes, love all the characters, but then slowly you grow up and realize there are different bits that you don't like. Rose being the main one, being just a terrible person in general. And it's just one of the things that your opinion will always change. And you're allowed to change your opinion. You can think something's bad and then it'd be good. You can think something's good, then it'd be bad. You're allowed to change that. And for me, this is definitely one that I've gone from being like, yes, this is one of my favorites to there's some good episodes, but most of it's not that great. Especially compared to series 1 and watching them so close together. Series 1 was a massively successful reintroduction to the show and the character. and a lot of the aliens. I'm sure we're going to come on to some points around the villains in this episode, in the series. Personally, I think the villains in series 1 were more creative, I think, compared to series 2. But I'm sure there's a number of things that go on in the background which we've discussed over the series anyway, and I'm sure there'll be even more issues going forwards. But yeah, it was...
At the end of the day, series 2 didn't have the Slitheen in it.
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah.
What were you expecting, series 2?
Series 1's the only one with Slitheen, so it's like right up there. Everything else is just... But yeah, I mean, I think we get a couple of passing mentions of the Slitheen in this, I think.
We get maybe. In Leather Monsters, I suppose.
Yeah.
We get mentioned, but...
That's as close as we get. It's a poor substitute.
In one of the worst episodes of series.
Yeah, still. Yeah. But yeah, and I think as we mentioned previously, I think there are more episodes in this that are just okay, whereas in series 1, more of the episodes are excellent than okay.
Yeah.
But so we're going to structure this around the same way we would an episode. We've got a couple of bests, a couple of worsts. They'll probably go over because, of course, they will. We have 13 episodes to talk about. So we'll start with the positives because, of course, we always start with the positives and then eventually ramble on into the worsts.
Yeah.
So what is your highlight of the series?
David Tennant and Billie Piper.
Same!
Yay! Now, let it be known. It doesn't necessarily always mean the characters themselves.
Yep.
But David Tennant and Billie Piper, right from the off, I think the chemistry was brilliant between the two of them. We saw that in the last 10 minutes of the Christmas Invasion. All the way through to that beach in Doomsday. Really, really great performances from both of them. David Tennant, made it look very easy, I think, to just become the Doctor. And that's very impressive considering he slept for most of his first big episode. But yeah, they really left a big impact. Obviously, the emotions, if you still have them, about the end of the series as well. But Billie Piper, I think, is a huge loss to the show at this point. And maybe not losing Rose, but certainly Billie Piper's been fantastic. The last two-parter, I think, especially. But the dynamic that they established throughout the entire series with Ten and Rose, particularly when they're like investigation buddies, is the ones I always really enjoyed. That side of their relationship. That's always really worked, I think. And you could tell they're just having fun, even when the episodes may not be as brilliant. They often will save it and make it at least watchable. And yeah, it's, say what you will about the 10th Doctor and Rose, people certainly do. I think them as a pairing, I think, is one of the strongest kind of TARDIS teams I think a lot of people look back on. And yeah, they carry series 2, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, the two characters is probably one of the only Doctor companion relationships, like proper relationships, not just, friends, that I would have believed. You know, they try and play Matt Smith off with Clara, I think, in series 7. It just doesn't work as well as I think this does. I don't know why. We'll come on to that eventually, whenever we get there.
Yeah, because I really like 11 and Clara.
Yeah, exactly. And then
we'll talk about Clara, I'm sure, when the time goes.
Yeah. It's not long now. Even
only a couple of years.
Even just David Tennant by himself having to step into those shoes that Chris Eccleston had. A lot was said at the time of his casting, just be like, is he going to be the right person? He doesn't look like he's the right kind of role. He doesn't look like a good actor. What's he been in? He's not good enough. That kind of thing that always comes around.
Yeah, it's the classic thing with every casting.
Yeah. People just didn't believe he could do it, and I think he successfully proved everyone wrong. And it probably helped that he had someone like Billie Piper there that had already been on the show and knew what it was all about, to help him easily settle. And I think you could tell that they really enjoyed working with each other. I don't know if it's on the current steelbooks they've been releasing, but I know there's the commentary where both of them are doing the Doomsday Army of Ghosts commentary, and you can really see their bond when they're talking about it. So I think that dynamic is a loss, and it makes the reunion in series 4 all the better, because it's like, oh yeah, I remember what this was like. Annoyingly, the Rose character does loom over the show for the next 2 odd years.
Yeah.
Which I think is a downside, but that's more of an issue for Series 3 than it is Series 2, because obviously at the time everyone was in the same boat. Everyone was, but we miss Rose, that kind of thing, which is a shame because I think it hampered Freema Agyeman in the role in Series 3.
Yeah.
But there's always got to be change in the show, and I think that it was handled very well in this, and without the performances of David and Billy, it wouldn't have felt as impactful, I don't think. Just because of their acting standards, it's just incredible. And everybody always wants them back, so they must have done something right. Literally.
Yeah.
So that was my first best. So what is your second?
The emotional beats throughout the entire series. I think more often than not, they're the highlights for me of Series 2. Because Doctor Who can be an emotional show at times. It's not just space and aliens and stuff like that.
Yep.
Bringing Sarah Jane back into it, the kind of emotional force that Elizabeth Sladen kind of brought, exploring a companion that got left behind, thinking she'd see the Doctor again, having to get on with her life without him. And even the fact that it's not like her and Tom Baker reuniting, the fact that it's still David Tennant, you still really felt that connection between them. I think a lot of that obviously helps that she was the companion when David Tennant was a kid, so he does have that emotional connection to her across the decades. But yeah, there's some really great moments through that, and they're kind of somewhat wrapping up with their story because we know it continues. But she found peace with the Doctor leaving her, and even Mickey's initial departure. I think there's a bit of emotion with that, just seeing how far he's come. Obviously, he comes back in 6 episodes anyway, but at the time, it's still a really cool emotional moment. And I mean, the big one's probably Rose leaving in Doomsday. For me, that is lessened by her coming back, but you can still feel it in the moment, and people, as always, still talk about it years and years on. Like we saw, last week or the week before when we actually covered the episode, it was the anniversary of it airing, so that the social media posted about it and stuff, and the interactions people still have after 15 years. It's kind of insane, really. So I think Doctor Who is often at its best when it really leans into those emotions. We'll see that many times in future. See Vincent and the Doctor. You can't go about 2 weeks on Doctor Who Twitter without seeing someone post that scene. Same with Doomsday, for instance, stuff like that. So while the quality of the episodes is certainly up for debate a lot of the time, when it gets it right emotionally, I think Series 2 really did shine, and I think those are the moments people still remember.
Yeah, definitely. If you ask anyone what their highlight of Series 2 is going to be, it's probably going to be Sarah Jane or that beach scene. It's unlikely to be anything else, which I guess is something in itself to say about the series. But I think Doctor Who's always been good at those emotional beats, even in sort of Series 1 with Christopher Eccleston, although it was more angst and anger rather than romance and depression. I guess that we've got in this one. Those are the two stages of life: angst and anger, and then romance and depression. But yeah, that Doctor Who's always been. It's a drama. It's not a sci-fi show. It's a drama, and it's always had that point for the BBC of it being a family drama. And I think moments like this in Series 2 show why it is a drama, why it's not a kids show on CBBC, although those do come later. But they're not, and even those shows, because they're still in the Doctor Who form, they still have those emotional beats. If you think about Sarah Jane Adventures, there's still really good emotional moments in that show, which is I don't necessarily think was something that Classic Who had a lot of.
No.
I think a lot of Classic Who it's a sci-fi show, whereas when they brought this back, they added a lot more depth, and you can see that throughout Series 2. My second is the supporting cast.
Ooh.
Just because I think we had some great performances from everybody, pretty much everybody in most episodes.
Goodbye, Chloe.
Yeah. So child acting aside, just like I've written, the obvious ones of Mickey, Jackie, and Pete throughout the series. More so probably in the Sideman Two-Parter and the finale, probably the Sideman Two-Parter we see especially more of Mickey and Pete. than we do in this. We see Jackie more through the series. Even in Love and Monsters, arguably the worst episode of the series, she is excellent in it. You know, Camille is a fantastic actress in that, and every moment she shows up, even if it's very briefly. But obviously, not only that, you've got Elizabeth Sladen and Sarah Jane, who's excellent in the one episode she's in. I forget the actress that plays Madame de Pompadour, but she's great in that episode.
Sophia Myles.
Yes, that, I believe.
Her.
Yeah, yes. She's great. She's great in that. The Novice Hain actress is great in New Earth.
Yeah.
Queen Victoria is great in Tooth and Claw. So almost every episode has an excellent standout supporting cast member, which is, again, something that you need in this kind of show. You need someone to come in and keep it fresh. And the episodes that don't have that good supporting cast are almost definitely going to be the worst ones. Fear Her, Idiot's Lantern, they don't have those standout characters, those standout supporting roles, which means they're not necessarily the best.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that Series 1 did quite well as well with its supporting cast, bar a couple, Adam, Suki, bar a couple. But again, those two, that episode with Adam and Suki in is the worst of that series. If the supporting cast doesn't shine, then the whole episode isn't going to work. And I think, although understated sometimes and you don't think of them first when you think of the series, a lot of the supporting cast are severely underrated and excellent throughout Series 2. I haven't really got much. It's just gushing about the supporting cast. I just think excellent all around.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Even John Lumick.
Sure.
I mean, hey, it's a memorable performance, which is what you want. Even Peter Kay. No.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. We remember
it. So what is your final positive?
Now, this sounds bad because I've thought of this one because I was struggling to come up with another one.
Right.
Although I did a bit later on, but it is the supporting cast one, basically. So that's my other one. Yep. And this is mainly because I probably won't get to talk about them until January next year if we keep up our schedule and get to the next Doctor in January. The reintroduction of the Cybermen.
The Cybermen are on my list as well.
Yay! Cyber boys for life. I think, certainly the Russell T Davies era, every series has like the big, this is the classic series monster we're bringing back. The Cybermen are the one for Series 2 for sure. And yeah, I think to get away from the very complicated history of them being from our Earth, from the classic series.
From our Earth, or the twin planet, or another twin planet, or another twin planet, or another twin planet.
When they first appear, we find out that Earth had a twin planet or something, which got destroyed in that story,
did it?
I think. And yeah, that's kind of, it got messy with that. I think that would have been difficult to try and just explain away that whole deal by being like, you're there from our Earth, enjoy. So introducing the parallel world concept is important to the series as a whole anyway, but it's a cool idea to bring them into a parallel world, seeing them beginning there so that new people to the series can have a new origin for them that's not convoluted and confusing. But people who were fans of them in the classic series will recognize them and enjoy them. So yeah, I love them. The concept behind them so spooky and I think surprisingly realistic after all this time, considering how long ago their first appearance was, and it's still kind of relevant today, the over-reliance on technology. And, I can see the earpod things happening in like 10 or so years. We're all just going to be brainwashed anyway.
Yay.
But yeah, they've been my favorite villains for many a year. And I think, I don't like how they're used in Doomsday particularly, but they are brought back into the modern day when it was the modern day in 2006 in a really effective way. And they do leave a bit of an impact, I would say. And yeah, there's some really strong footing, quite literally with them, because made of steel, for further appearances down the line in the new series. But I think it was a very clever way of bringing them back and setting up for the future. But I love my Cyber Boys, so I had to give them a shout out. So we don't see him for a while now.
I was just thinking when we next see him, and I suppose it's the next Doctor, isn't it?
The next Doctor, yeah.
Which is a while away.
January 2022, we should get to it.
Yay! So look out. Oh, at least that'll be close to Christmas, though. So it'll line up. It's just a good positive. But yeah, they're on my list purely because when I was younger and even now, it's just I love the design of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're quote unquote my Cyberman design. You know, the one that I grew up with and I'm always gonna like. And whenever they change from that, I'm like, oh, I don't like it. It should look like this, that kind of thing. Which is obviously stupid. Nobody should hold those opinions. Things are allowed to change. But I love the design. I love the reintroduction of them. I love the cyber controller in general, just that look as well with the brain. And I just can't speak highly enough. And sort of realizing that they're not now going to be in it till the next Doctor, I'm like, wow, they were really underused in the first 4 series.
It's like 2 whole years before we see them again. Over 2 years, because it's a Christmas special.
Well, that's it. We see them in the Christmas special, and then we see them in the Pandora Opens, but only as like a background thing, don't we?
Yeah, that's the next time after that. Yeah,
and that's.
But they are in every Moffat series, so.
Yeah, and then the next story is the one with James Corden, isn't it?
Yes.
The one where the Doctor's in the shop.
Yeah.
Which I couldn't tell you what it was called because I've completely
Closing Time.
That's it. That's the James.
Of course.
The James Corden duo of the Lodger and Closing Time. But yeah, I think they're quite underused. I think in that case, in the first 6 seasons of the show, you know, they don't come back, which I think adds to how good they are when they do come back.
It's like Davros.
Yeah, literally. And who's Davros? We've not seen him yet. I don't know who that is.
I've seen the classic series.
Oh no. Yeah, Cybermen are great. I love the reintroduction. I love the way they look, the way they sound. They're actually menacing. Although looking back at Classic Who, you look at the very first Cyberman design. That is horrifying.
That's still the best design, I would say. I love the Mondasian Cyberman design. So creepy.
They look horrifying, and I can kind of get why they didn't want to bring that version back, because that would have scared kids shitless.
And they never did.
They never did again.
Ever. Nope. Definitely not to please Peter Capaldi as he's leaving to bring back his favourite monsters. Definitely not.
10-ish odd years later.
Oh boy.
So what were your sort of other best points around the best points?
The only other one I really had, you kind of talked about it, the story arcs that the supporting cast got. Mm-hmm. So maybe not the supporting cast just in general, but the story arcs for mainly Mickey, you know, his kind of 0 to hero arc was really well done. And then the Jackie and Pete kind of send off for them. Still one of my favourite kind of ties up to character arcs that I think we get. I like how they reintroduced Pete in a parallel world. Having already met him in series 1, this is a new version. He loses his wife. We already know Jackie lost her husband. And then him reappearing in Doomsday and then kind of reuniting / meeting, because it's different Jackie and Pete. It just felt like a nice logical conclusion to their story. And then, little Tony Tyler comes along. The little patter of Tony Tyler feet. Lovely. A few years later. But yeah, I feel like the supporting cast and characters that we met in series 1 get a really nice send off in series 2.
Yeah, and some getting nice to send off in series 4.
Yeah,
but we'll come on to that. Yeah, I haven't really got any other best points really, which I think says a little bit about the series. So we'll shoot on into the worst of series 2, and I'll start with my biggie. The wasted potential.
Ooh,
I think.
Same.
Purely.
Who are you, my family?
Mainly because, and we spoke about it. Each episode is sort of, especially towards the latter half of the series. There's so much that we were like, oh, if they just did this or if they just did that, you know, we could see where they were trying to go, but it just didn't work. Yeah. Love and Monsters is the obvious one. Fear Her, The Idiot's Lantern. It's always those 3. But it's just there's so much in there that I would love to either see revamped and try to do again either in the show or in another format around the show, because there are some really good ideas in there. You know, something that literally absorbs everything it touches is a cool concept. It just doesn't need to be played by Peter Kay, and it doesn't need to be played for laughs.
He needs to wear more clothes.
Yeah, literally. He needs to have more than just underwear when he's running around. And the whole thing of something that can just draw something and it's stuck on a page. That's a cool concept, but it just shouldn't be a child that's doing it. And then we'll go on to, Idiot's Lantern. This thing that can infect TV and steal your face and your life force or whatever. Imagine putting that in modern day when everyone's on the internet and stuff. And they kind of do that, as we mentioned, I think at the time in I've forgotten the episode name.
Bells of St. John.
That's it. Bells of St. John. They kind of do it in that one, but it's not, I'd want to see The Wire come back and get more backstory into her. How did she come to Earth? What even is she? We don't really get any answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the main thing, is that there's so much here that could still be used. So I guess in theory, it's not necessarily wasted potential, because it's not technically it's not wasted yet, because you could come back to it and you could do whatever. But in those
it's
episodes,
been 15 years.
yeah. But it's unlikely they're going to come back. But in those episodes, it's definitely the potential is just wasted, and they just weren't done the right way. And there's a number of issues behind that: writing, behind the scenes conflicts, all that kind of stuff. Which is fair enough to an extent, but if you are managing a 13 episode big budget BBC drama, then you kind of need to get your shit in order, really. You can't be turning in scripts late, Russell. Stop it.
Just stop. Well, he has stopped doing it now, to be fair to him.
Yeah,
that's because he's not writing for the show anymore.
It's because he's not writing anymore. He does like the one show every 3 years.
But when he does it,
yeah,
they're apparently good. Not that I've seen them, but
they are, to be fair. I'd highly recommend It's a Sin, and the other one, the one where it's Boomtown. No, the one where it's Turn Left, but with a family. That one's good.
Okay,
it's good. He does write good stuff, and to be fair, he does write good stuff for Doctor Who. It's just sometimes his writing can cause issues for other writers, which, if you do want to know more about, by all means, go and read The Writer's Tale. Where he definitely goes into more series 3 and 4, but definitely hints towards series 2 in it. But yeah, wasted potential. There's plenty of it in this series.
Yeah.
So what is your first worst?
Subpar villains in subpar episodes.
Yep, I've got villains as one of my worsts.
Yeah, mainly the original villains that series 2 came up with, because I know we haven't seen, well, I say that we have seen werewolves in Doctor Who before, but that was a classic series. But even then, they're a pre-existing story, and it's not like Doctor Who invented the concept of werewolves. But yeah, we have The Wire, who's a bit OTT and screamy and like, just calm down, you're a lady in the screen. The Absorbaloff is infamous and a bit like,
to be fair, that was designed by a child.
Yes, and that child should be ashamed. No, it's a good idea. But just the episode surrounding it and everything just certainly doesn't help, for sure. And the Isolus, there's an interesting idea there as well, it being abandoned by this huge family and stuff. But the episode, I think, let that idea down for that monster. So that's kind of a shame. And then some of the other ones as well, like, I love School Reunion and everything, and I think the Queer Teams are fine, but at the end of it, they are bad people. I think the best villain in School Reunion is Mr. Finch, because he's great. Anthony Head is wonderful. Outside of that, it's like, okay, bad people, sure. But yeah, overall, I think the original created villains for Series 2 aren't some of the best that the show came up with, but what can you do? What's done is done.
I definitely agree, and I think part of me thinks that that's a problem the show has in general. If you think of how many quote-unquote new Who villains are iconic now, you've got maybe the Weeping Angels, the Slitheen for ironic purposes, the Silence. You don't really think of anything. Name me another villain, quick.
Daleks.
Well, exactly. That's what I mean. And I get that it can be quite hard to come up with quote unquote iconic villains. And even if you look at Classic Who, obviously not all those villains were great because they haven't translated over to New Who, unlike some of them. No. But yeah, I think that this, compared to sort of last year as well, I think this one is kind of weak. Especially if you think of one of the villains, unique ones for last series was the Empty Child in the first place, the android, even the Gelf to some extent. You know, there's plenty in there. Even the Slovene. There's not that standout villain from this one that's not from Classic Who.
Yeah.
You know, you've got the Sideman and the Daleks that come back, but they've already been in the show. Cassandra isn't really a villain in New Earth, but she was already in series 1. The Krillitanes, although new, don't they like hint at that they've been in the show before? I never knew if they actually had or if
they haven't actually. It's just the Doctor noted it are.
That was just a trick.
It's a trick.
But you know, there's like a werewolf. A werewolf's a thing in general. Same with Satan. That's a thing in general. The Ood aren't really a villain, although they could be classed as an iconic monster.
Yeah.
But they're not really a villain in any of the episodes they appear in. Which, you know, it's a shame there's no iconic villains in this. And I think that the fact that none of them are memorable kind of is part of the reason why the episodes don't do too well. Especially Fear Her. If you asked anyone, just a casual Doctor Who fan, not one like that thinks about it all day, every day, a casual fan that's seen it saying, oh, who was the villain of Fear Her? They'd go, a child. They wouldn't say...
Child.
They wouldn't say this space flower, would they? They would just say it was the child. Well, they might not even say that. They might just think the dad in the wardrobe, because there's not that iconic villain in that episode. The Wire is just a bad villain in general, but I think that's more because of the writing not giving depth in the backstory, which you spoke about before.
Yeah.
So it's just the villains aren't great, really, and I think they get better in series 3. Just thinking about it, maybe the
Judoon are iconic.
Judoon, the Carrionites.
We have the old lady with the straw.
Yep.
Plasmavore.
The Plasmavore.
She's fun to an extent.
We've had the
Macro. I like the Carrionites. So the Macro in Classic Who.
Lazarus. The Pig Slaves.
Why is it Rusty Davies here and pigs? Like, stop.
That Sun.
The Sun. We'll see, like, because we haven't had a good track record with episode 7 so far.
No. Oh, well, we are in series 3, and they.
Yeah, they're good.
Especially in that episode.
And then Future Kind,
Yeah.
And the Master, yay! But
Toclafane are pretty.
Toclafane are alright, yeah.
So, obviously we'll come to it when we come to series 3, but I think series 3's villains are already better. I think series 1's are better. It all just feeds into the fact that series 2 is probably it's I don't know if second season syndrome's a thing where shows kind of drop off after the first. They start great here because they have to impress, then they drop off with complacency, and then they get better again.
Yeah,
I think that's the thing that happens to a lot of American shows, whether that's sitcoms or maybe Supernatural could be one of them, where it starts okay and then go ooh, and then it finally picks up.
Yeah.
But that is what it is. That's a natural thing. Not everything's going to hit, and unfortunately, the villains did not hit more than they did.
No.
So, what is your last worst?
This is only my second. We've been going for a while. This is only my second.
Oh Christ! Yeah.
Yeah. My second is some very inconsistent toning throughout the entire series. And my main issue with that is the fact that even just singular episodes themselves are very inconsistent with tone. Because of course you can have like a horror episode, or you can have a comedy episode. You can have just, run-of-the-mill Base Under Siege episode.
But you can have both in a Zorbula.
Yeah, in the same series. That's fine, because of course you do different things. But even just within the episodes themselves, they change it. And I think that really undermines a lot of it. And you're like, well, what's the point of anything? Rise of the Cybermen was all over the place tonally. not a fan of that at all. Idiot Stanton was like, oh, we have this abusive husband, abusive father, and then hungry and all of that, and faces people.
Yep.
No. And then Lover Monsters. We have, oh, my mother died when I was a child.
Yep.
And then we have, you've dabbled with aliens. And then we have, oh, my daughter did drugs. Now she's gone missing. I'll never see her again. And all these people will be killed. And then we have Glom and paving slab blowjobs and what is going on. And Fear Her. We have like this lonely child and, oh, another abusive father.
Yep.
And then we have scribble drawings.
Doctor carrying the torch.
Yeah, and then we have everything's all happy, and then there's a storm approaching. Oh no! Yep. And then it's just. Yep. And then we have Rose and her sad, dramatic departure, and then there's a bride in the TARDIS. And oh, okay, fine. There's just so much inconsistency there, and that's literally 2, 3, 4, 5 episodes I've talked about in a 13-episode series that are very inconsistently toned just within themselves. It's a lot. It's a bit messy, which is a shame. Some people will enjoy that and I think in a recent example, Future of the Judoon very much so does that. But a lot of people love that, whereas I still wasn't a bit of a fan. So at least I'm consistent in things I don't like about Doctor Who, I guess. But yeah, I think tonally, Series 2 just needed a bit more fine-tuning within the episodes themselves to make it flow a bit better. But
yeah, I think with your example of Fugitive, I think for that one at least, it's kind of like a fun start that gets more serious, whereas with these ones, it flip-flops constantly between every 5 minutes rather than because a change.
The big shift of Fugitive of the Judoon is also a plot shift as well. So I think that does work better than here.
Yeah. But yeah, I do get what you mean. And that kind of ties into my one where some of the plots were quite convoluted and confusing. Obviously, the main one I'm thinking of here is Satan Pit and everything around that one. Because, what are the rules? There's no rules established for that one. There's a number of points in the series where we've gone, if they just said this, it would make more sense. If they just added a line here or if they just removed this line here, it would take out those plot holes that they've just created for themselves.
Yeah.
And that sort of, there's loads of unexplained things within it, which is, when even just in the last episode where they said, oh yeah, it's been 3 years since the Cybermen locked themselves away. It's like, you don't need to say that it's been 3 years. You don't need to add in that extra thing to make it more convoluted for somebody to follow. Especially if they've just watched the Cyberman Super and this one, they're like, hang on, there's 3 years, but they look exactly the same. What's going on there?
Yeah.
And I just think that there's, again, it's a time travel show. Convoluted plots kind of come on the packaging. You should expect that, and it's only going to get worse as it goes on with complicated storylines. But at least most of those you get a resolution for. I think a lot of these, none of these are like setting up plot points to be explored later on. A lot of these are just plot holes that just go unexplained for the rest of the season. And we kind of had that in series 1 with the Reapers, where they would come in for that one episode and then they're never seen again. That's something that they could have easily changed for that. And I think it's more so in this one, where a number of things, like at the end of school reunion, where they're like, yeah, Kenny blew up the school. Okay, so Kenny is literally going to prison.
Kenny's life is ruined? Yeah.
How are they ever going to get Kenny out of that? No one's going to believe them. And then even in that same episode, the Doctor doesn't know the kids have all got out safe before he tells K9 to blow up the school. So he could have killed all the kids, but you could just have some kind of dialogue, which like, right, I'll give you 5 minutes, get them out, do whatever.
Yeah.
So that might be a writing issue. It could be a direction issue. It could be an editing issue. They could have chopped and changed some lines that could have explained it. Who knows? There's probably a number of reasons. But either way, there are a number of unexplained plot points which, upon a rewatch and more critical viewing of the episode, you're going to spot a lot more of than you would if you just watched this first time and then moved on.
Yeah.
But I think that's the case with most shows in the first place. So now what is your last worst?
Now. The Torchwood story arc. Now, hear me out.
Mm-hmm.
Before the Torchwood fans come for me, it's not about the show. Okay, I'm sorry. I feel like, I mean, it's a very different approach to story arcs with Russ T Davies, because they're more like Easter eggs, and then this is what it all means. But by the end of series 2, you could take away all the hints for the Torchwood, nothing would have really made a difference, because they just discover Torchwood anyway. And by the first 10 minutes of Doomsday, it could have been set anywhere. Torchwood is ultimately completely irrelevant to the story of series 2. So you're kind of like, why do we just mention all this and build up to this then? Because like Bad Wolf is a very similar kind of thing, but it directly impacts the Doctor and Rose with the regeneration and everything. And that all leads to that. And that pays off the Ninth Doctor's arc, putting him in the same place and all that with the Daleks. But here I feel like it wasn't quite necessary, especially when they do in Army of Ghosts anyway. It's like, oh, this is the story of the Battle of Torchwood. And, you know, even then we would have been like, oh, what's Torchwood then? Just in Army of Ghosts. We wouldn't need all these references building up to it. Because we literally saw how Torchwood was made in episode 2. So we kind of knew what it was anyway. So for me, you know, I couldn't really find any worth from the story arc at the end of the day, just because the show itself made it irrelevant 10 minutes into the finale. But, you know, it does lead to spin-offs. But
yeah.
And even like, you could say, well, you know, Captain Jack in series 3, he mentions he works for them. And the Doctor's like, you work for Torchwood. And Jack's like, yeah, but it's fine now. And then he's like, oh, okay, cool. So it doesn't have the impact.
Well, that's it. And I never also thought in these episodes, I never get the opinion that the Doctor's like, oh, Torchwood are the worst.
No.
You know, I never get that hatred that he has, you know, in theory with using guns and stuff, which is fair. But I never get that hatred towards Torchwood, because they are no different to UNIT. Literally no different to UNIT. Yeah, he's fine with
basically,
them.
Yeah.
I think in defense of Torchwood and the arc, this was only pointed out to me when I was watching a review of the series. It's that it's more about the Doctor and Rose setting up their own downfall, because they fucked around and didn't take Queen Victoria seriously in Tooth and Claw. She made a point of making sure that they would always be watched and whatever, which is what leads to them being found by Torchwood and the Sphere and getting separated. So I think that if you kind of watch it that way round, with that in mind, it kind of makes sense. But I also get that you could take Torchwood out and just have it be a unit base that they were brought to.
Yeah, and the fact that, I mean, I like that point, but the Doctor and Rose never addressed like, oh, we indirectly caused this by being dicks to Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
Then you would like, oh, okay, well, there's something there at least. Because Rose found out like, oh, I'm the cause of the Bad Wolf thing. I leave this message, you know. Yeah. And by like episode 11 or whatever, they're aware that they have seen these like Bad Wolf signs all around. They know that that's following them around. Then they never once really noticed the Torchwood thing.
No, it's just for the audience, isn't it? Because we do hear Torchwood occasionally. I'm thinking the Cyberman 2-parter, Pete mentions it. I think it's on the TV. But other than that, it's not really mentioned too much. Maybe they could have had in Satan Pit, you know, oh, we're part of this Torchwood expedition team, and they'd be like, oh, Torchwood, that's the thing that blah 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 blah. Yeah, just put something in there. But maybe they did and they cut it. But
yeah, like the Doctor is like to Yvonne, like, oh, Torchwood, isn't that house in Scotland with Queen Victoria? That would have been the perfect moment to be like, oh, damn, we kind of caused this place. But he just like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I effectively built this institution that is now trapping me.
Yeah.
But yeah, there isn't that. I think that's just for the fans to be like, oh, more than anything else.
Yeah.
But I do agree. I don't really have any sort of worst major points. I think I just want to touch on the CGI wasn't great throughout the series, but I think that's more of a 2006 issue than a show issue. When they use, and we mentioned this, I think, maybe in Love and Monsters, but when they use the prosthetics and the makeup and stuff, it all looks great when they use practical effects.
Yeah.
But the CGI at the time does not hold up very well. It gets better. I think in the series finale where they put the budget, it works. But it doesn't really work elsewhere. Honorable mention to Rose for just being a terrible person still.
I'm genuinely surprised she wasn't just in your main one.
You know what? If I didn't come up with the others, she is on the outskirts. She's close.
Yeah.
but I just think that it's similar to series 1. She's just very selfish, and that's shown a lot in Doomsday, where she literally ditches her mum to stay with the Doctor. But it is what it is. I don't want to talk too much about her because she's probably gonna pop up in series 3 in our worst lists anyway. Or maybe not Rose, but maybe it'll be
the shadow of Rose.
Yeah, shadow of Rose, or the Doctor's infatuation with Rose. I'm thinking more Shakespeare Code than anything else when I'm speaking this. But yeah, was there any other worst points for yourself?
I mean, you kind of spoke about it to an extent, but I do feel like overall the series was both overwritten and underwritten quite a bit at certain parts. Particularly, these were some of my actual negatives from the earlier episodes. Because New Earth, they really overwrote the problem there with the infection spreading and everything. So they just have to be like, well, let's mix all the medicines together and that'll work. And
let's just have them touch each other.
Had 3 minutes left. Yeah. The monks in Tooth and Claw, they overwrite how big of a threat they are, and then we just have to forget about them because we don't have time for that right now.
Cartwheeling and
they just
the rolling over the table and
so they're keeping everyone in with guns and then they just disappear. We never find out what happens to them. I guess Rise of the Cybermen was quite slow for a first part. It took a while to kind of do anything at all. A few things like that. Things that went unexplained. I think it's mainly like your wasted potential point, really. It's like, we could have done this, we could have done that. A lot of that came from maybe overwriting the problem a bit or not giving it enough attention. So there's kind of a bit of that. And this series has 2 chances to tackle the abusive father kind of thing in Idiot Stanton and Fear Her. And I think it grossly mishandles it both times.
Yep, definitely.
So that's fun.
100%. I'd argue that Idiot Stanton is worse than Fear Her, but yeah, you're definitely right.
I'd say so, yeah.
Oh, what a mess. What a mess. In that case, before we get into like our actual scores, what would you consider, thinking back, to be your favorite episode?
My gut would say School Reunion, because that's such a special kind of thing with Sarah Jane and K9 being involved. There's emotions behind it. Anthony Head as Mr. Finch is great. Mickey has some funny moments in there as well. The idea of the companion being left behind is all very well and good. So as much as I'd love some like other stories as well, the finale is great and everything. But if they were like, oh, do you want to watch, this really great episode or this really great story where some things happen that you may not be as fond of, I'd be like, well, let's watch School Reunion. Sarah Jane is great and K9's great. Yeah. So my gut would say, and I know for a fact that this is wrong, confirmed to my actual scores that I give episodes, but I'd say School Reunion is like my favorite.
Yeah, that's also my best is School Reunion for me. Almost, I think Girl in the Fireplace is probably a close second, thinking about it. Just because I like the story in that one. Again, the aesthetic, I think, for that one as well. But nothing beats School Reunion with the nostalgia and the fact that I think at the time as well, we were in school and this was set in a school. It was like, oh, this could happen to us kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I think adds a layer of nostalgia for it, which is fair enough. That's always going to happen.
Yeah.
So what would you say is your worst episode of the series?
My worst would probably be Love and Monsters.
I think we're going to line up then, because mine's Fear Her. And I think that's the ratings you gave Love and Monsters worse than Fear Her, and I gave Fear Her worse than Love and Monsters.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly surprising. Those are the 2 worst. Yeah. So I think either or is a valid answer.
Yeah, definitely. But 100%. So what statistically were our best and worst episodes?
Right, let's have a look at this. So statistically, well, the obvious ones are the least favourites, to be fair. Because your least favourite was Fear Her. My least favourite was Love and Monsters. I gave Love and Monsters a 4. You gave Fear Her a 3.5, which still remains the lowest score any one of us has given an episode thus far. So Fear Her is truly in a league of its own there. Congratulations. But yeah, my favourite was actually Army of Ghosts, so I gave that a 9. And you actually have a joint favourite. You gave Impossible Planet and Army of Ghosts an 8.5.
Oh, so that's kind of
top 2.
Impossible Planet surprised me, but there we go.
Yeah, that was the story that really kind of surprised you, I think.
Yeah.
How much better you liked it this time around. Shook.
It's the you. The you did it.
Yeah, so those are our best and worsts ultimately performing from the stats, but I do have a few other ones. So, I mean, going forward, I'm not going to be like, well, comparing this series to series 2 and 3 and comparing this to series 1, 2, 3, 4, I think going forward, I'll just compare it to the series that comes before to see if Doctor Who has improved or worsened over the next series. But it's easier to do it now because this is only the second one. But the best 2-parter rating wise from combining our scores for us was Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, probably surprising no one. And for both of us, we rated the 2-parters better as they went along. Although you gave Possible Planet, Satan Pit the same score as Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. But for me, they got better and better. But yeah, Impossible Planet and Satan Pit overall got an 8 from us. And Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel got 6.8. So sorry, but that is what it is. And then our joint favourite, least favourite 2-part even was Rise of the Cybermen, Age of Steel. So you gave that 6.75 overall as a story with both parts. I gave it a bang on 7, so that's nice. Yes. So best individual episode combining both our scores was Army of Ghosts, because we got that average of 8.75 as the best singular episode. But very close behind with 8.25 was School Reunion and The Impossible Planet. So those are like the top 3 best individual episodes of the series. Fair. The worst, again, surprising no one, with an average of 4 was Little Monsters and Fear Her. Because that's fine. And then combining all our scores and making an average for the entire season. And we need to, I guess, note that this is out of 14 episodes, not 13, like series 1, because we include the Christmas special. But your average was 6.89 out of 10 for series 2, which is, I had to work this out compared to series 1. That is only 0.61 down from series 1.
Oh, well, so, there you go. It's not bad.
It's not a dramatic, like, this is shit.
Yeah.
But my average for this series was 6.96 out of 10. Which is down 1.07 from series 1. So, for series 2 for that. And then the average score that we gave both of us together was 6.92 out of 10, which is down 0.88 from series 1, which we gave was 7.8.
Wow.
So there we go. But that's just like the average of our scores. If you were to add up all the scores out of 140, 10 for each episode, you gave it 96.5. I gave it 97.5. And an overall average, we gave series 2 97 out of 140, which is down 4.5 points from series 1. Your overall scores was 2 less than series 1. Mine was 7 less than series 1. So I really didn't like series 2, I guess.
I thought I was being harsh.
Yeah, so damning indictment of series 2 from losing 7 whole ass points. So yeah, that's kind of how it fared compared to series 1. So overall, it was worse. Maybe in some cases not as bad, but it was the weaker series.
Yeah, I think that it's telling that the good episodes were probably up there for us, and then that made the bad ones even worse, I think. Yeah. So in that case, what, in theory, you should be giving this series 7 out of 10. Is that what you would give it?
No. Overall. So I think there's just individual episodes, you are going to remember more things you liked or didn't like in the moment, aren't you, when we go through them, scoring wise. But I think I would say 6 is probably a fair-ish assumption for the series as a whole. But that would also come from, series 4 maybe affecting the ending, things like that. I mean, I can handle giving it a 7, but yeah, I would probably, in my heart of hearts, want to go lower, but I can't argue with the facts, so.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, I think I'd stick with the 6 as well. And then who knows, if we were to add in books and other media to series 2, it could bump up the scores, because I know that I think both of us quite liked The Stone Rose and The Feast of the Drowned and all that, the novels that came out around the time. I think they
and there's
do
a
have
book set during series 2 with the Daleks in, so technically Doomsday wouldn't have been the first time Ten meets the Daleks.
Is that quick reads I am a Dalek or whatever it is?
I don't know what it's called, but I know that's one.
because I think I've got it. I think I've got it somewhere.
Right.
It only cost me £1 on eBay. I was like, oh, I'll get it.
Oh, bargain.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, Doctor Who isn't just a TV show. There are a number of books, games, big finishes. If we were to take in, they're even expanding series 2 now with David Tennant and Billie Piper returning to their roles in audio form. But that would be too much to cover, at least all
we would never finish series 1 with all the science. More like get on to anything else.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that's been good about the new series. There's less.
Hooray! There's less to hate about it.
Yeah. But no, in all fairness, there's loads of stuff around Doctor Who. So if you do really enjoy series 2, even if you didn't enjoy it, there still might be books out there with 10th Doctor and Rose Tyler that are excellent. I know a couple of the Big Finish ones have been doing quite well. There's obviously comics in the first place. Mm-hmm. There's no video games, I'm afraid. They don't come around till the 11th Doctor, because 2006 was obviously not a good time to get into video games for BBC.
Yeah.
Although not that they really got into video games since then.
We'll need to play those.
Yes, we will get to them eventually. I do think that brings us to the end of series 2, though.
It does.
Almost officially. It's mad. This series is 15 years old.
Yeah.
This year, which is insane that it's that old, because other than the CGI, it's not necessarily the oldest thing we've seen in the show.
Yeah. What I will say, I don't think this is as dated as series 1 is.
No.
They don't have like TV shows and stuff in it, I guess. Apart from maybe like Peggy Mitchell and things like that.
But at least
overall.
That's in the time, because that's set in 2007. So that's that's not like in the future where it's supposed to have carried on for that long. At least that's set in the time.
Yeah.
And this does obviously set things up for the future. The Doctor obviously being by himself, has to find a new companion. The parallel universes have been set up, so that's going to come into play in series 4. Torchwood's obviously been set up for the spin-off show, Sarah Jane for her spin-off show, which will obviously all come to a head in series 4, but that's quite a while away yet.
Yes.
That sounds, if your calculations are correct, we'll be there at Christmas.
Yes.
Which will be nice.
Ho. It'll be a lot cooler than it is right now.
Which is going to be even worse, because now we're going to actually come onto the Runaway Bride in the middle of a heat wave.
Yeah.
So as mentioned last week, the next episode we're looking at is the Runaway Bride, with Catherine Tate as a temporary companion during this little sabbatical, I guess, the Doctor's having from a full-time companion. But we will be back with that next week. By all means, let us know what you thought of Series 2. Let us know if you think we are terrible at reviewing these episodes or not. I'm a big boy. I can take the pain. It is what it is. I make these videos for me, not you.
That's a good thing to say to the audience that watches every single week without fail.
It's fine. If you've made it this far, let me know what you think about my outrageous statement there.
If you've made it this far, type banana in the comments and then we'll know.
Yeah, so I expect to see no bananas in the comments. But that is it.
I'll even forget to type banana.
We'll be back next week with The Runaway Bride. Bye.
Bye.